Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Lunch with Leaders. Today our topic is water, something we take for granted. We turn on the faucet and the water comes out. We flush the commode, it works. We don't have very much, we don't think much about it. It's one of those readily, easily taken advantage of things that we just take for granted. But Flint, Michigan isn't taking it for granted anymore. In fact, when Erin Brockovich was on national news, she mentioned Louisiana specifically as one of 4 states that had problems with their water. Now, we have collected the people here that are responsible for a big chunk of our drinking water here in Louisiana to answer questions. But let's go back a little. I just finished telling the story to our presenters. About 20 years ago, I kept smelling gas. And every time I called the plumber out, he'd tell me, pat me on the head, "Oh, that's fine, little lady. You're just all in your head." Well, after paying the plumber 3 times to tell me it was all in my head, I decided to call in a favor from an old friend. Most of y'all know Bill Benedetto. It used to be with GSU/Energy. And I said, "Bill, can you put a meter on this and see if there's a leak somehow? Because I'm smelling it." Turns out there was a significant leak. And the only reason the plumbers didn't catch it is because when I was smelling it, there was no wind blowing. And when the plumbers were there, there was a breeze. But when we had to dig up my complete atrium, we found holes that large in the pipe that carried the gas. 2 months ago, they started lining the sewer pipe in my subdivision. So with my mind, my question is, so when are you going to do something about the water line? They were all put down about the same time, which brings us to where we are here. We have not taken care of our infrastructure, not as much as we should as a city, as a state, or a nation. Now, according to Pat Crater, he says we got to get Washington to free up the money. So I want you to listen very hard. I want you to ask very hard questions of these people. Let's face it, they're accountable to you. You're the citizens. And remember one thing. When it's finished, then it becomes part of you to take the action necessary to get this taken care of. Our first speaker is going to be, wait a minute, where is she right first? Oh, here she is. Our first speaker is Amanda Laughlin. She is a professional engineer. Amanda graduated from LSU in 2002 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Biological Engineering. She's a licensed professional engineer in the state of Louisiana. She began working with DHH, most of y'all are political junkies, Department of Health and Hospitals, in 2002, and has held several engineering positions within the agency. She was the district engineer in the Lafayette area for several years before returning to Baton Rouge and working as the engineering compliance manager. Amanda is currently the chief engineer for engineering service. Would you please welcome Amanda Laughlin?
Afternoon. I'll probably will exceed 7 minutes. It's hard to go over regulations in 7 minutes. So I do work for the Department of Health and Hospitals, and we are the primacy agency for the state of Louisiana for drinking water. That basically means that the Environmental Protection Agency has given us the authority to act on their behalf and enforce the regulations for the state of Louisiana for drinking water. Primacy activities include monitoring water systems for water quality. We also do on-site inspections every 3 years at water systems and look for physical items. It's like an audit. We also look at their administration, etc., and see if there's any violations of the system at that time that they need to correct. We also conduct plans review across the state. We have 9 offices with engineers. So anytime there's a water line extension or a chemical treatment change or a new plant, et cetera, that has to go through our office for a permit. We manage enforcement actions that are taken against water systems that have violations. We also have other activities associated with primacy, like operator certification. So if you're a water operator and you operate systems or a wastewater system in the state, you're licensed through our office, and we track hours, make sure people are trained and have the appropriate certifications to run the systems. We also respond to complaints. So if there are issues with water systems, if you have a brown water complaint or a color, maybe taste and odor, something going on, the public can call our office and we will respond to those complaints and provide technical assistance to the system to fix whatever's happening. So in return for those activities, EPA gives us a small grant. I say small because it only funds about 20% of our program in order to complete these activities. So the rest of the funding for our program is a state general fund, and we also have a fee, self-generated fund. The fee is $3.20 per customer per year to run our program. So and the water system is allowed to keep a percentage of that fee for administering fee to the customers. So each household or connection, business, et cetera, is paying about a quarter a month for the monitoring that we do for the state of Louisiana. We have about 1,360 public water systems in the state. Of those, 1,000 of them are what we consider community water systems, and that would be a system that serves your home, a town, a community, etc. A non-community water system, a non-community water system would be like a business or a school, etc. And the way the regulations are set up, if you're a community water system, you typically have more monitoring requirements. The regs are more stringent. Non-communities may not have as many monitoring requirements associated with them. The regs are typically different for a groundwater system, which is well water, versus a surface water system, which might take water from the Mississippi River and go through a tremendous amount of treatment and then distribute it to the customers. So the regs are different. They're based on source and what type you are. So I'll skip through some of the rule promulgation. But basically, the federal government will pass a reg, and then the state will be required to implement it and enforce it. We can be more stringent than the federal government, and we are in many cases. We require minimum disinfectant residual in the state of 0.5 milligrams per liter for chlorine, and that was in response to the Naegleria fowleri deaths that we have in the state, the brain-eating amoeba that you may have read about. So now we require all water systems to meet a minimum chlorine residual. We are more stringent in public notification. So if your water system has a violation, there's a requirement to notify the public. The federal government, say your water system failed to pull a bacteriological sample. The federal government public notice requirements would allow the water system 12 months to notify the public, and we require a 45-day notice in the newspaper, 90 days mail out. So we are more stringent in a lot of cases. Primary contaminants are contaminants that would have a health effect, and they have what's called a maximum contaminant limit, or an MCL. So there's certain standards that water systems have to meet. Then there's secondary standards, which would be aesthetic standards, or things that are displeasing, like taste, odor, color. That's where your iron and manganese falls, but they're not enforceable standards. So every 3 years, the health department goes out and collects water samples if you're a groundwater system at the wells. We look at all the primary contaminants, or most of the primary contaminants at that time. For surface water systems, we do the point of entry, which is after they treat the water, but before it goes out to the first customer. We pull the same samples there every year. Every month, the water systems collect bacteriological samples and send them to our lab for analysis. And depending on how large of a water population driven. If there is an MCL for chemicals, if it's half of the MCL or greater, we automatically start monitoring the water system quarterly. So even if they're not exceeding the MCL, if we feel like they could at one time exceed the MCL or there's the potential to exceed the MCL, then we immediately start doing quarterly monitoring. So I'm running out of time, but just to give you some statistics for violations in the state of Louisiana, 85%, in 2015, 85% of our water systems had 0 violations. So that's a really good compliance rate. The other 15% may have only had 1 administrative violation. And so it doesn't mean that 15% are, have a ton of violations. It may mean that they failed to monitor 1 month or they didn't do a public notice, which is considered an administrative violation. Most violations in the state are associated with the disinfection byproduct rule or the total coliform rule. The total coliform rule is the monthly bacteriological sampling that we do. Disinfection byproduct rule is byproducts that can be created if you have organic material in your water mixed with your disinfectant that can create byproducts. So the systems actually collect and analyze those samples on their own. And if they're in violation, we do have people that violate that rule. And also because the systems are responsible for collection, there's a lot of monitoring violations associated with that. And I wanted to touch a little bit on lead and copper rule. Because of the Flint issue, there's a lot of questions about that and how we look at the data, et cetera. And it is a different rule in the fact that the samples are pulled from homes. So if your home is built before 1983, your water system should be pulling samples from those types of homes, older homes. Because back before current regulations, there was more lead in the solder, you may have a lead service line, etc. So, depending on how many samples they pull, let's say they pulled 10 samples. The 9th sample, if you rank them from lowest to highest, the 9th sample would be your 90th percentile, and that would be the sample used for compliance. So, if there's any data, like let's say you had 9 samples that were 0 and your 10th sample had an exceedance, the system would effectively be in violation of the rule at that point. But all of the customers who had samples pulled at their home will get notified of those results. Now, at the health department right now, currently what we do is we make sure that the systems are notifying the customers that got their lead, that they did get their lead results. When we've had exceedances in the past, we notify our maternal and child unit in the health department and make sure if there's any children living there or if it's a daycare or school or anything like that, that people are notified. And so we do over and beyond what the rule requires, and we make sure that the public is notified, especially people that are living in their homes that may have a lead issue. Some general information, if you do live in a home that is considered older by this rule, earlier than 1983, let's say, if you're concerned, you can always have a sample pulled. It's a first draw sample, which means that you would put your cup under the tap and then turn it on. So it's the first draw. You want the water to sit there for like 6 hours before you would have it analyzed. Flushing the line, that's not how we tell people to pull the samples. You don't want to flush the line. You want to get the first draw. So if you're concerned and you want to have a sample taken, there's a list of certified labs that will run that for you. Also, when you wake up in the morning and you want to flush your tap for 2 minutes or so, if you're concerned, you can do that as well. In 2013, Louisiana implemented the Lead-Free Act a year earlier than the federal requirement. So that will help a lot in the future. The lead requirement now is very, very, very low, so all new construction will have extremely low lead amounts in their solder, etc. But it was something that we did that the rest of the country was not doing at the time. We did early implementation. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a consistent rollout of new regs. I think we've had 10 in the last 10 years. It's very difficult for water systems to keep up with the new monitoring. Some water systems may only have one operator, and they're responsible for many other duties in their town. So that is a problem that they face, and it costs more. You know, every time a new reg comes out, it will cost systems more, and therefore it will cost the customers more. So they're dealing with all of that, as well as aging infrastructure, like we touched on earlier. I think all of us will probably be able to talk a bit about aging infrastructure. It's a problem in our state, but it is a nationwide problem, and it's billions of dollars that is needed to get all water systems where they need to be. So some good resources out there for you as a consumer. If you're concerned about anything with your water system, we're always there to answer questions. Our website has all of your water system's information, violation history, who's running it, what kind of treatment they have, etc. So that's a really good resource. If you need help navigating through our website, you can call someone on staff. We'll be happy to help you. And every year, your water system is supposed to be sending you a consumer confidence report. We actually generate that report for the water systems with all of the data in it. And they, in turn, send it out to their customers so that you're aware any tests that were run that year, all of the levels will be printed for you to read. So that's my time. Thank you.
And then some.
We just like to use it. Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. I hope we can absorb everything that you said.
I'm sorry.
Okay, our next guest is the State Health Officer. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jimmy Guidry.
Thank you all. Thank you for the invitation to be here. Flint, Michigan has brought attention to drinking water, which makes my job easier. My job is to protect your health. And when people don't pay attention to what's important, then it makes my job a lot harder. It's the same thing if you were to buy a car and decide you're not going to maintain it. You don't replace the tires, you don't replace, and the car doesn't last very long. Well, we buy systems and homes and all these things, and they're very expensive, and then we don't pay attention to maintenance. And if we don't maintain things, for whatever reason, funding's not there, or it's, what you don't see, you don't pay attention to. Guess where most of our infrastructure is? In the ground, under cement, under roads. So it's hard to pay attention to what the problem is unless you're monitoring and managing. In Louisiana, we have over 1,360 water systems. A lot of small systems. Some of them are just a subdivision. Some of them are just a store. A lot of people in rural areas that have their own well. Private wells are the responsibility of the owner. But all public systems are responsibility of all of us. The people that run the system, the state making sure that they're operating properly. It's a monumental task. So, for a couple of years now, when we found out there was a brain-eating amoeba in our water system, which had not been documented here in this country other than in Phoenix, but not ever documented in this country in treated water. I asked CDC, I said, why does Louisiana all of a sudden have this problem? And other states don't, because this amoeba lives in water. We tend to find it in lakes. How did it get in our drinking water that we're treating? And they said, well, you lost people here and we tied it to drinking water, but to be honest with you, we never look at other water systems for the amoeba. We're the only ones in the country that really tested this amoeba. And what the amoeba brought home to me wasn't a lot of cases, but you don't want to lose anyone to this, but that our infrastructure, that our system is in trouble. And not that we didn't know it, but I didn't know how much trouble it is. Because what we tend to do, there's two things that protect us, that water that you're drinking comes out of the tap, that keep it from getting contaminated. One is you keep pressure up, so you keep the water flowing. So if you're using it and you keep the pressure up, it keeps contamination from coming in. And the other is putting disinfectant in. And so what we decided, because we looked at the Australian experience, let's put more disinfectant. And the reason I pushed that hard wasn't so much for the brain-eating amoeba, although that was what drove it. It's what gave us the reason. What really drove it is the fact that we have aging systems that can get contaminated. So if you're not going to replace them or maintain them, you better have something there when something comes in your pipe. Chlorine, something to keep that organism from growing. So I don't just worry about chemicals in the water, and I don't just worry about bacteria. I mean, there's just a whole list. There's 90 contaminants that we look for, that EPA requires. And most of our complaints are not about the things that can kill you or get you sick. Most of our complaints are about the way it looks. The big difference between water that looks like this and water that looks like that. And the difference has to do with iron and manganese, which we normally use in our body for process in our body. We don't know that they're that harmful. It's not even regulated by EPA. But it's what gets attention because it's what you see. You know, it's the same thing when you go to a restaurant and the things you see are, you're sitting at a table and you see a roach, or you see something, oh my God, I can't believe I'm eating here. Well, guess what? What's more important to your health is what's going on in the kitchen. Is the temperature correct? Is the preparing of food correct? So people have to understand the complexity of how do you protect health. But at the same time, it's very hard for me to explain to the media and everyone that that brown drinking water is safe. I mean, who wants to drink it because it doesn't look safe? But it doesn't have the things that can kill you. It doesn't have the things that can make you sick. But there's something there that needs to be treated. So if I decide as a state health officer, I'm going to start addressing color, because that's the complaint I get the most. Not about their health, not about people getting sick. Most of our water systems do a great job. People are not getting sick from our drinking. We don't have the Flint, Michigan incident that I'm aware of as far as putting lead in people's blood over and over again. When we have an exceedance, we address it. So it's not the same thing that they're trying to point to Louisiana's infrastructure as compared to Flint. They're comparing apples and oranges. Yes, we have aging infrastructure. Some systems are worse than others. And most of the attention has gone to a little town in North Louisiana in Tinsall Parish called St. Joseph's. Their system's 90 years old. They've not maintained it. They've not, it's not that they didn't want to. They didn't have the leadership they needed to do it. They also didn't have the funding. A very poor community that required money to do this. And the question is, who pays for this? So, what some states have done is that we're going to regulate manganese and iron. We're going to take care of this color issue. So therefore, when a system wants to do that, requires treatment, might take chemical treatment, might take some very expensive filters. If you want to do that, they tell their communities, you decide if you want to invest in that treatment. If you don't like the groundwater, you got to be willing to pay for it, because some of these filters are millions of dollars. They're not cheap. St. Joseph's right now, we're looking at preparing their infrastructure, replacing it, whatever it costs. They can't guarantee me clear water, but to replace the system right now, not the system, but the pipes, not even the treatment system, $6 to $8 million for about 12 to 1,700 people. I mean, it's astronomical cost. When you look at Louisiana, in 2012, they had engineers that studied our infrastructure to say, what would it cost to replace drinking water infrastructure in Louisiana? $5.3 billion. Now, I'm talking to you about this when the state's trying to figure out how to get itself out of the hole, right? I'm talking to you about the importance of this. So all of a sudden, you got to decide, am I going to take care of those families that have a child that's not developed, who needs all these, physical therapy, occupational therapy, children that are disadvantaged? Or am I going to take care of drinking water? We try to balance. We try to make sense of it. We try to work with water systems to make sure they do what they need to do, and make sure that we can protect your health. We do take it for granted that what comes out of the tap is safe to drink. To show you an example of the difference in cost, when you take groundwater, that's really good groundwater coming out of the ground, and you treat it, it's cheaper to treat it and take care of it. It's got to go through pipes that are maintained, and you got to make sure you don't have corrosion going on. You got to measure these things and use anti-corrosive methods. We take water out of the Mississippi River in New Orleans and elsewhere. Would you ever drink water out of the Mississippi River? You may be drinkable. Now some people say I don't like the taste, but it is clear. But it's huge systems, with lots of customers paying the bill. If you go to a little community like St. Joseph's, who has 1,200 people, and they got to have an entire system, what is happening around the country is that these little systems are coming together because you need more customers to pay. You can have one plan for a larger system without having to pay for two plans. So there's a plant in St. Joe's and there's a plant in Tenshaw Parish, very expensive, and they're not connected. So EPA is actually going to look at that and say, what does it make more sense? Yeah, their pipes need to be replaced, but do they need a treatment system? Or do they need to get their water from nearby Tenshaw Parish? That, we're trying to figure this out. Right now, choices to fix our infrastructure are very limited. We have drinking revolving loan fund that we get from EPA. It's low interest money that goes to communities. They have to qualify and they have to pay it back. When they pay it back, low interest, very low interest, it goes into the fund, it goes back to another water system that needs it. So we've been doing this for years and we're replacing slowly things that need to be repaired. And we've spent millions of dollars doing this. Now remember, I'm spending millions, but I need 5.4, 5.3 billion. I'm not even touching the need. But yet, I'm accountable that if people get sick, I gotta explain why they're getting sick. So our job is to make sure that that water comes out of there, first of all, is safe. It doesn't have bacteria, it doesn't have chemicals that can harm you. Number one priority. Secondary, what color it is, yeah, I'd like to address it, but if I enforce that, every community in Louisiana will be paying a water bill, not 50 bucks, not 100 bucks, thousands of dollars. So that's what we need to figure out. Where does the funding come from? How do we work on it? And we certainly have some folks that have been working on this and made the panel to where they struggle with where does the money come from as well as I do. But I can assure you, my heart's to help you make sure that when you drink it, you don't get sick. We spend billions of dollars a year as a society on drinking water in a bottle. Regulated by FDA. Doesn't have near the requirements that you're drinking water out of the tap. Doesn't have near the protection, but it's clear. It's clear. I'm not going to be able to tell you how safe it is. So people are not getting sick, but we're so close. You know, every time they do a repair in St. Joe's, there's a ball of water loose. So besides having groundwater, they have to ball their water to even use it because they're constantly repairing the system. One break after another. And so those are the kind of complicated things we're trying to figure out. How do we help? How do we make this work? We're glad when Gene invited us because this is near and dear to our hearts. We do this every day. And we try to work with systems. We even have a water committee that we have at DHH with all the people that are vested in this. We have the water experts around the state sitting at the table. It is a very, very demanding job. I'm only about 40 years old. Look how old I am. I'll leave you with that thought, but thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Dr. Guidry. Our next speaker is Pat Kerr. He is CEO and president of Baton Rouge Water Company. Pat was appointed president in 2005 and chief executive officer in spring of 2009. He is responsible for the operations of the Baton Rouge Water Company and its subsidiaries, Parish Water Company, Inc., and Ascension Water Company, and serves on the board of directors of each of the three companies. Mr. Kerr serves on the board of directors of the National Association of Water Companies and is a member of the American Water Works Association, Water National Water Utility Council. He is past chair of the Capital Area Groundwater Conservation Commission and has served on the Louisiana State Groundwater Commission. Mr. Kerr earned an MBA from Louisiana State University, a Bachelor of Science from Boston University, and is a graduate of the President's Program in Leadership at the Harvard Business School. Please welcome Pat Kerr.
I couldn't have said that better myself. Thank you all for inviting me today. I really enjoy things just like this, talking about water and talking about Baton Rouge. Let me start by saying we are very fortunate in Baton Rouge. While there's some variance from well to well, the fact is that the water that's produced in wells in Baton Rouge is very, very minor scaling or corrosion causing. But the fact is water is known as the universal solvent, which means that waters are corrosive to some degree across the board. A water's corrosive tendency depends on its physical and chemical characteristics. While Baton Rouge does have some wells, as I said, which produce some mildly corrosive water, we do treat that water with an inhibitor to reduce corrosivity, and we routinely monitor the effectiveness of our treatment. Fortunately, and furthermore, Baton Rouge has a very young, moderately young water system. In 1950, there were 15,000 connections in Baton Rouge. We have 160,000 now. So quite a lot of growth has happened since we knew a lot more about water than the systems in Flint, Michigan. We are not plagued by what is the source of a lot of lead in people's drinking water, which are leaded service lines. So the connection from the water main to your meter and to your home. I've been with Baton Rouge Water now since 1994. I have not seen a single lead service line come out of the ground, and we have replaced tens of thousands of them. You guys may remember Mr. Burgess and all of his street rehabilitation program. Well, that program required that they mill down the streets and that all of the water lines that were too close to the surface be moved down. And we found 0 lead service lines. I'm not going to tell you there are none in any part of our system, but we're not finding them. Corrosion and corrosion control is one of the most important problems in the water utility industry, not just because it produces lead, but as Gene talked about, they are replacing lots of sewer lines. One of the reasons they're replacing sewer lines in this city is because we built a lot of those sewer lines out of concrete. And unfortunately, one of the byproducts of sewage in a line that's not flowing full is sulfuric acid, which is corrosive to concrete. And so what's happened, we go down and dig those things up, and what you find is a little bit of concrete that used to be a pipe in the bottom, and the top that's above the wetted area of the sewage is completely gone. So they're replacing them. But our water is not causing that in our pipes. So you're not going to see Baton Rouge Water Company following the contractors for the sewer line. Thank goodness. But I will tell you that corrosion can affect public health. It can affect the public's acceptance of a water supply, and it can affect the cost of providing safe water, as Dr. Guidry said, tremendously. As we witnessed in Flint, changes in the source of the community's water supply are not a simple matter. It is critically important and is required in Louisiana, I don't know about Michigan, that additions and changes to water supplies must be permitted by the Office of Public Health before the changes are made. I'm confident that if Flint went under the same scrutiny Dr. Guidry and Amanda and their staffs subject Louisiana water systems to, Flint's lead problem would not have occurred. How can I make such a statement? The fact is, lead found in drinking water is almost entirely due to leaching due to corrosion. What's corrosion? Simply put, corrosion is the deterioration of a substance because of a reaction with its environment. In the water industry, a substance which deteriorates is metal pipes, the fixtures in your home, cement lining and pipes, and the environment is the water flowing through the pipes. In Baton Rouge, we're fortunate to have water that's very soft. Total hardness range between 8 and 18 parts per million, mostly in the form of manganese, which is good and bad, with magnesium. With low levels of dissolved oxygen, you think about rust, which is a form of corrosion. You expose metal to oxygen and moisture, you get rust. If there's no oxygen in the environment, rust does not occur. Why you can find ships at hundreds of feet deep that look like they did the day they sank. So the fact that we have low dissolved oxygen in our water is very helpful to Baton Rouge as far as corrosion is concerned. We also have a relatively high pH and alkalinity that's based on the material through which the water is flowing, subterranean, in our aquifers. We like to think most of our water fell on the earth about the time Christ was walking. the first go around, and it's been filtered through that rock, but picked up, and sand, picked up a little bit of all those constituents that you find in it over those centuries and eons. Let's turn back to Flint, though. Although we all agree, I think, the burden facing the people of Flint is very sad and highlights the need for decision makers in water systems to both understand environmental regulations and to have strong, broad insight into process change. The fact is, the unsafe lead levels in Flint were caused by a variety of political and economic factors, ultimately due to the switch to a new water source and the failure to modify corrosion control practices, which led to the stripping of protective coatings that had built up over the years in those systems. The lead's always been there. We talked about what the sampling target is for lead in people's homes. We actually think homes that were built before 1983 have got a protective coating built up over them, and homes between 83 and 86, when the Safe Drinking Water Act and lead and copper rule were first promulgated, were the target. They are still the target today. Newer homes have less lead in their fixtures, less lead in the plumbing, and are not really a target. But we sampled several hundred homes for lead and copper. When we started the program, just as every water system in the country did, we were required to sample for those constituents twice a year, every 6 months. Once we were able to demonstrate that was not a problem in Baton Rouge, we were moved to what's called reduced monitoring. So we now monitor every 3 years in Baton Rouge. The sample that's taken takes a lot of help from the people who live in Baton Rouge because, as Amanda said, it's the only chemical testing that we do that requires it to be done at someone's house. It's kind of an inconvenient thing for them to do, and we want the same taps every 3 years. We want to see how our corrosion control is working and whether it's effective or not. So we go back to these same people every 3 years. Lots of them have moved on, don't want to do it anymore, but it's important. If you're approached by the water utility in your community to do a lead and copper sample, please participate. It helps. Okay? But what you have to do is turn off, not use water in your home for 6 to 8 hours, and then we give you a bottle. As Amanda said, you turn the water on and catch the first draw out. We're trying to catch the water that's been sitting in that pipe for 8 hours. We want to know, worst case, what's the lead going to be, lead content's going to be, if the water's been sitting for a while. I will tell you, it's important, if you have some lead in your home, to let the water run, and what we say is until the temperature changes. So it's been hanging out in your house that's cooler or warmer, depending on the time of year. You know how you feel cold water gets colder or warmer as it's coming in? When that temperature change occurs, you're getting fresh water out of the main. That's something we tell folks who have a problem with lead they ought to do. It doesn't cost anything but a couple of seconds. So if you want to reduce the lead exposure in your home, it's a great way to do it. Back to Flint again. We stripped off that coating in Flint's main by switching to water that was from a different source. The long story is Flint was buying $22 million more water a year from Detroit. Flint and some other communities got together to build a new water treatment plant and told Detroit, when the new treatment plant's finished being constructed, we're not going to buy water from you anymore. And guess what Detroit said? We're not waiting until your new plant's built. You can't have any more tomorrow. So Flint said, my goodness, what are we going to do? They went to the river. The river water is more corrosive than what they were buying from Detroit. It's more corrosive than what they're going to get from Lake Huron, which is the new source. But they did not take the time to analyze the water and figure out how to make sure it didn't strip that protective coating off. It did. Lead levels went up. And what we're seeing is hysteria based on that wall. I don't think there's anything wrong with the hysteria. Unfortunately, the ask is becoming someone else pay for the fix. And in Louisiana, and in most of the country, there's no one available to pay for the fix. The communities have to stand on their own 2 feet. We need to make good decisions at the start so we don't cause a problem like this. And if we can do that, we can continue to provide safe water to people in Baton Rouge, in Flint, wherever else it might be. Another fact is that in just a few months' time, that lead and Flint system will be passivated again. They are, in fact, feeding a corrosion agent that will build up enough of a coating that this will go away and not be a problem. But that community has been so harmed and so incensed by this problem that they're not going to believe the people who pat them on the head and say everything's going to be okay anymore, even though it will. And so you're going to hear them keep screaming, we want new infrastructure. I don't know how you afford to do that. I really don't. I do think there were some significant failures in leadership in Flint. I think there were some significant failures in understanding in Flint. And I want to tell you that the way the Office of Public Health works in the state of Louisiana and the way they involve themselves in decisions like this when they're made in Louisiana is extremely protective of you. It's not always smooth sailing between water utilities and the department, but they really do take to heart your health. And they make us miserable if we try to do something that we think is okay but can't prove. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Dr. Guidry, for protecting the folks at Baton Rouge. And thank you all for inviting me this morning. That's everything.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to speak on behalf of the Rural Water, Louisiana Rural Water Association. Pat Credo has been there 26 years. He attended the University of Southwestern Louisiana. He serves on the National Rural Water Emergency Response team, also on the Governor's Water Policy Task Force, the Governor's Fluoride Commission, and I asked him, I didn't know fluoride was still around. The Board of Directors for the Louisiana Municipal Association, and the Board of Louisiana Conference on Water, Sewage, and Industrial Waste. He is here representing not only rural water, he's also representing the Louisiana Municipal Association. Would you please come up there?
Thank you, Gene. I don't know which one was harder for you, my name or my handwriting.
How do you say your name?
Crater.
Crater.
In French, it's Credo. I must say I'm happy to be here, but I thought I was going to get to meet Erin Brockovich, and I guess she's not here today. So I'm going to speak to you briefly about the smaller water systems and our efforts to keep them trained and informed of all state and federal regulations and the technical assistance that LRWA, Louisiana Rural Water Association, provides. The LRWA has been a member of the National Rural Water Association since 1978. The NRWA and the State Rural Water Associations were formed to assist the smaller water systems with the daily operations and maintenance of their utilities pursuant to the Drinking Water Act. The Safe Drinking Water Act was signed into law and intended to ensure safe drinking water for the public. Pursuant to the Act, EPA was and still is required to set standards for drinking water quality and oversee all states, localities, and water suppliers who implement these standards. LRWA has over 1,000 utility members and associate members that represent approximately 2 million population in Louisiana. We primarily provide training and technical assistance to the water systems with a population of 10,000 and below. However, we never turn down anyone. We have helped the Shreveports and the New Orleanses and the Alexandrias, as we will continue to do. LRWA receives grants from the United States Department of Agriculture, EPA, and in the state of Louisiana we have grants with the Department of Health and DEQ to provide on-site TA and training. Our circuit riders provide primary assistance to small communities for operations of safe and clean drinking water supplies and compliance with water regulations. This assistance protects the sizable investment the federal government has made in rural water infrastructure. Circuit riders are in the field every day helping systems with compliance, operations, maintenance, management, and training. The Circuit Rider program has long been one of the USDA's most successful public-private partnerships, efficiently and effectively using appropriated funds to provide this training and technical assistance. These programs are the most effective environmental protection efforts for drinking water and wastewater, groundwater, source water, and compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. Small communities want to ensure quality water and stay in compliance, and the LRWA Association provides them the technical resources to do so. The LRWA also provides an energy conservation program. This program is designed to reduce energy consumption, water loss, sewer infiltration, and increase the efficiency of operation for water and wastewater systems. The technicians in this program provide water leak detection, a consumer metering program, infiltration surveys by blowing smoke into the sewer system. Maybe some of you have seen this in the past. And this is to help locate breaks in the collection system. Video in the sewer mains, locating breaks in the sewer lines, and bench testing water meters for accuracy. The LRWA is also very hands-on by providing emergency response and working closely with the Department of Health and DEQ during any natural or man-made disaster. My staff and I set up command centers along with DHH during Katrina and Rita in areas that was hit hard by those two hurricanes, as well as Hurricane Ike and Gustav. We were hands-on, on the ground, pulling in generators, equipment, MREs, which is meals ready to eat, water, and counseling. And yes, I said counseling because when we hit these areas after Katrina and Rita, you just can't imagine what it did to these operators, these specialists that were out there. And no idea where to start or where to go. And we were able to lend them a shoulder on here to help them get through this. After Hurricane Katrina and Rita, I'm happy to say we were able to start the WARN program, which stands for Water and Wastewater Agency Response Network. It is a utilities helping utilities program by using the professionals from other utilities that have not been hit by the storm to come in and help the ones that have been hit. And this program was started in Florida and California, and I'm happy to say now, because of the efforts of the National Rural Water Association, this program is in each state across the nation. The state of Louisiana has approximately 6,000 specialists, operators, according to my last count, could be wrong. LRWA trained in classroom settings along with the HH and DEQ, a little over 4,000 of these operators this last year. Our training sessions provide information about the certification rules for specialists, operators, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Water Act, application process, handling and safety practices, sampling and monitoring practices, enforcement, sanitary surveys, and sustainability, just to name a few. We have a training session going on right now in Pineville, Louisiana, that has approximately 115 people there. We do this several times a month, all year long, geographically across the state. We also provide training to board members of utilities and elected officials, such as mayors and councilmen, in management practices and defining responsibilities, financial practices, along with the state and federal regulations for public water systems. I hope this was enough information to let leaders of vision know that the state of Louisiana, the Department of Health, is doing its part in training our water and wastewater professionals, and will continue to do so. If any one of you would like to get on our website, we have a bunch of information. We have meetings all the time, training sessions all over the place, and you guys can attend. You can go to www.lrwa.org. And I think, and I want to say this before I get off. I went under 7 minutes, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Well, I guess you're not destined to be a politician, Pat. Thank you very much. We have had the benefit of some great expertise up here, but I know that there are questions that you came to ask. Who wants to lob the first question? Anyone? Remy?
Back in November, the Morning Advocate ran a article concerning mercury contamination advisory across the state. I'm sorry. Back in November, the Morning Advocate ran an article concerning mercury contamination in water, surface water across the state. It also said that since 2008, the general administration decided to eliminate the general funds, and at that point, the fish testing program was stopped. As a Boy Scout leader and somebody involved in the state, to me that was pretty upsetting. Do we find mercury in any of our drinking water systems?
My engineer's going to look up the testing for mercury. What I will share with you, it was a collaborative between Department of Health and Hospital and the Department of Environmental Quality. They would collect the fish samples and run the tests, and then we would interpret. When you look at certain species of fish, we have advisories out there as to how much it should be. Mercury tends to end up in the soil, it settles out, or it ends up in fish fat, it ends up in things that you eat. Water as a source of mercury is not something I really saw a lot of. It's more the environment. Mercury is toxic to your system. It's a neurotoxin, so it affects your brain, and it really affects the brain of a young child or a baby. So our advisors usually go out for children and pregnant women about how many fish to eat from that area. But drinking water, I'm not aware that that's a source of mercury.
No, I don't think, I'm not aware of anyone on quarterly monitoring. Yeah, I don't think we have anyone on quarterly monitoring or increased monitoring for mercury. But I'll double check our records. That's not something that comes up in our mind as anything we have an issue with drinking water. But I'll double check for you. I don't think we have anyone in the state on quarterly monitoring. It should be increased monitoring because they were at the MCO or greater. So I will double check.
I was aware that the state had issued these advisories years before. So what I was surprised is that we were not monitoring it. It's my understanding much of this mercury pollution comes from coal. My question to you is, are there any other failures of this nature? I'd like to repeat that was the Jindal administration after both the Blanco and Foster administration had paid funds to test. Are there any other failures that we do not know of? Like I did not know for years until I read this in November. In our water system testing that you know of, that are not being funded, or we tested and then we forgot about testing since.
Can I add to that? Are there any other tests that a prior administration discontinued that needs to be put back in place?
Excellent question. And I can speak freely because before we were budget cutting and telling people nothing's changed. Nothing's been impacted. But prior to the administration, we had folks, sanitarians in our department that would go collect water samples. It's not done in other states. We did it in Louisiana because there were so many small systems that didn't have folks that knew how to collect it or collected it properly or did the proper thing. That program of us collecting water samples, this is for back tea. We still collect water samples for chemicals. Now the systems are responsible for collecting those water samples. We found our complaints on drinking water went way up as a result of that decision to cut out our ability sanitarian, eyes-on, collecting samples, talking to the operator. It was an excellent system. But because of budget, because the money went there, that was eliminated. And the burden was put on the water systems. Now, the large systems, Baton Rouge, they always collect theirs. Talking about all these small systems, that, I would feel a lot safer if that program came out. I would feel a lot safer that somebody that works with us is talking to people, and we're having communication, and we're making sure that that water collected is collected at the right place, at the right time. But that was eliminated. We used to have four public health labs in the state. They've combined into one Lord, and it's in Baton Rouge, and it's an excellent lab, and it should be able to handle capacity, but it cannot handle it. This we realized recently. We closed the Shreveport lab last year. Decision made based on budget. We got a new lab, we can do all the sampling in the new lab. But then we have to carry all these water samples from North Louisiana to Baton Rouge. And that made some of the water tests difficult to address. So every time we get a water test that was rejected because it taken hours to get to our lab. So that was a cut that impacted our ability to protect human health. So these were tough decisions, and we're facing them now. What do you cut? What is it you're going to cut that's not going to impact services? I don't have a problem cutting. It's hard, it hurts. But you tell the people the impact. You tell the people, hey, we're cutting this and this is what it means. Do you still want us to cut? So people don't want to pay more taxes. I understand that. But something gives, something goes. Department of Health and Hospitals, in the past 8 years, went from about 13 across the state, 13,000 plus employees. We're now at a little over 5,000. The expectation for us is to do what we've always done. People don't want to pay taxes. You don't want to have state employees. Don't expect the services. Don't expect the protection. But it's not easy. Like I said, I'm not as old as I look. It's not easy to figure out what do you cut? What goes away? What do you save? Is it that, between that poor child, that mother, that drinking water, all these things have to be measured. So when you look at right now, we're trying to decide, are we going to live and cut our budget yet again? We've been doing 8 years of cutting. Continue to cut, I promise you, we're all going to pay. We're going to pay, we either pay with taxes or we're going to pay in outcomes. So I guess you hit my passion. I appreciate the question.
Sir, you have a question right here. This gentleman right here.
I guess I have a question more than statement rather than a question. One of the problems is that the state of Louisiana has no water resources agency. It has what people call the Department of Natural Resources, which is really nothing but another name for a mineral board. But there is no agency in the state of Louisiana that is directed toward water resources development. Is there any move in that direction that you know of?
Matt?
I just will call your attention to a commission that's actually chaired by Scott and Jeff, and it's the Louisiana Water Resources Board, which is charged with exactly the concern you have. Look up the Louisiana Water Resources Board, and I think you'll get some good information. I know that they meet quarterly. I attend from time to time, but they used to be the Louisiana Groundwater Board, and all water now is their purview. So I don't need to argue with you, sir, but and I'm not a technical expert on what DEQ and DNR do and don't do, but I think you may want to talk to Scott.
Is there a state-run policy planning for the future? Our aquifers only hold so much water. And I guess I start with the health officer over there to answer, is there a state water policy that will provide us with drinking water now and now, but in the future?
I think the water board's charge is to look at saltwater intrusion and our water resources and protecting them. So I can't speak to whether they've written a policy or not, but I'm constantly watching it because there's always requests to use things near aquifers for storage. For instance, in the Lafayette and Iberia area, they use salt domes, which is very near an aquifer, to store petroleum or natural gas. So whenever we take a risk, and this is something we do in our plan development, we don't like sewage being very close to your drinking. But whenever we take a risk that takes more water out of the ground than can be refurbished, we run the risk of salt from the Gulf that's coming. So if we don't pay attention and we don't have a policy, and I'll tell you why it's so hard to have a policy. The amount of water that's thrown off is by industry that provides jobs for us and you know, our environment and our economy. A lot of people come here to get the water. Our water is a precious, precious resource. But when industry takes out more water than we can replace in an aquifer, it puts our aquifers at risk. So you bring up a good point. I'm not sure that I've seen a policy that totally keeps that from happening, but I do know they constantly take an eye on it. There was an issue with methane gas and water up in North Louisiana that I got involved with, and it was naturally occurring gas in the ground. When we started fracking all this, it was blamed that the gas got the water from fracking. That was never proven, nor was that thought to be the source of naturally occurring gas. But Louisiana has a lot of resources that can co-mingle and get you in trouble. And so drinking water, saltwater intrusion is always a concern of mine because the coastline is being eroded. So the salt water is coming closer without sucking more water out of the ground. So saltwater intrusion is happening in farms. It's happening the closer you get to the coast. And it could happen here in Baton Rouge if we take the water out too quickly. So I think it is monitored, but I'm not going to tell you it's comfortable. I'm constantly, try to keep track of it. It's hard to measure. It's hard to know because we'll have all this rainfall we had, and some of that replenishes it, and we're good. Then we'll have a drought, and all of a sudden an aquifer's at risk. Sparta aquifer in northeast Louisiana has been at risk for years. It doesn't replenish fast enough. So I can't be honest and say I've seen a policy, but it wouldn't be bad to have one. I'm just not sure how you get the agreement between those that are using the resources to agree on what that policy reads.
Follow-up question. Mark Joyce. Who's responsible for the monitoring of saltwater intrusion in Louisiana? And who would set the policy for that? Who has the responsibility for the monitoring? Is it DHH?
I know it's not me. I know it's not DHH. I do think it's DNR, but I'm not 100% sure, so I may be speaking out of school. What I do know is we're not monitoring. Now we send people to sit on these committee meetings where they have these discussions. I think back then would know in this water system if they started getting saltwater intrusion, so that the water systems would know. But I'm not sure. I don't want to answer something I don't know the answer to. I'm not sure.
But it's not you, it's not DHA.
Correct.
Thank you.
We'll have to chase that down. John?
My question is to the water company CEO, Mr. Kirk. Pat. Look, I've been buying water from you for 50 years, your company at least. What we got 400 to 500,000 customers you have, right? Well, this commission that we were talking about, you just mentioned, I was participated that 2 or 3 years ago. The chairman was Scott Angel. He just came over about that time from DNR, where we got the Bayou Corn thing because they issued a permit to that company that's mine too close to the edge. Well, in that conversation, that was about our aquifer, which is really what we live here, we're more concerned about. Well, I guess for 2 decades or more, we've heard that the overuse of the aquifer is going to cause saltwater intrusion. Well, it was very clear that Exxon and General Pacific, Georgia Pacific, use about as much water, and sometimes more water, than your 400,000 or 500,000 customers use. Well, it was a lot of smart people, and one was a lawyer. Now, on this commission, let me tell you, it's 21 people there. Usually when you look at that, you say, well, I doubt that this is intended to accomplish what, you know. So, this lawyer reads about a small paragraph to the commission saying, you know, the state constitution is very clear. I'm going to ask him a question. It's very clear that you have the right to tell a company that is causing a lot of negative impact on Louisiana citizens to stop. Well, that commission, thank you. And that was about it. So I want to ask you, here's my question to you. I believe that if you're willing, and we'll ask the legislature to lean on whoever to tell Exxon to stop. Now, would you be willing to do that?
I actually work quite a lot in the legislature, and I'll tell you, the inside baseball story is it's really critical in Baton Rouge when it's critical, and then no one cares. The industry has a statewide presence, and they have far more support in the legislature than the Louisiana delegation does. Senator Claytor, Franklin Foyle, and others have made this argument, and it falls on deaf ears. I will tell you that I consider our role at Baton Rouge Water to make sure that every time you turn on the tap, between now and the next coming of Christ, there will be clean, safe drinking water to drink. I cannot tell you that I can get industry out of groundwater. I cannot tell you that the fact that they exist on the Mississippi is enough of an argument to tell them they should take their water from there. There is no protection under the law for you as a consumer of drinking water, vice them as a employer. The law is highest and best use, and they make arguments that their use is a viable use of water. So until we can change the dynamic and change the broad support and keep doing things like Sunnytown is doing, pushing to build support to move industry to the river, I don't see it getting solved legislatively. And so what that means is that at some point we're going to change the way Baton Rouge receives its water. I will tell you, the good news is this is a huge problem all over the world, and by the time it becomes an acute problem for Baton Rouge, I hope someone else has solved it to the point that it's not as expensive as it is today to take out constituents out of drinking water. But in the defense of industry, they do in fact employ our people, and they do in fact provide a lot of benefit to the economy, and under the state law right now, they are as entitled to take the water out of the ground as I am. Louisiana is what we call a right of capture state. Whoever brings it to surface owns it. It's interesting, Louisiana claims ownership of surface water. And so Louisiana can tax you for taking water out of the Mississippi River or charge you a fee, but they can do no such thing for groundwater. So we've got exactly the opposite situation of what we really want. We tell them, we want you to start taking water that we can tax out of the river instead of taking that cheap, really pristine water out of the ground because it's for the public benefit. And what they say is, no. So I hope, yes, I support your argument that something needs to be done. I will tell you that we are making this pitch. But the fact is that we don't have enough support to make it happen.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to.
How far north has saltwater intrusion been reported?
I'm going to push back on Dr. Gibby a little bit again. I'm going to tell you the saltwater that's in Baton Rouge is not Gulf of Mexico saltwater. It's from a lot closer to home. We've had it well analyzed by some folks at LSU, and we believe that that salt water is from upwelling of water around the Sorrento salt domes. They're not going away anytime soon.
Makes sense.
Okay? But it exists in the coastal regions. There's lots of aquifers that are affected, but Baton Rouge is closer to home. The good news in that regard is that we're not sticking a straw in the Gulf of Mexico and sucking to get rid of the salt water. This well that we built in Baton Rouge 3 years ago now that scavenges salt water off the bottom of the aquifer, we're fighting a limited amount of salt water that's being produced in Sorrento and coming across the Baton Rouge Fault, which is why we're so enthusiastic about how effective it's been. It's been a home run for us, for the people of Baton Rouge, not for Baton Rouge water. But it's a solution that we could move on without legislative support. I think you all know the Baton Rouge Water Company is an investor-owned utility. It's not a city government or parish government agency. I don't have to jump through the hoops of bond issuances and voter approval. I have to convince the Department of Health and Hospitals that this is doable without changing water quality. I have to convince the Public Service Commission that it's in our customers' best interest to support the costs. So it's not a tax, but it's an increase in your rates. That project costs us about $3 million to build. And I have to prove to the Public Service Commission that it's useful. So if I can meet those tests, we can make the investment. I will tell you that going to the Mississippi River wholesale is not an option. It's not going to happen. Not all of our groundwater is imperiled by salt water. Might we have to go someday and supplement it? Yes, we might. I don't think we will. I think we'll draw water out of aquifers that we've bypassed heretofore because they have too much manganese or too much, something that's easier to treat than salt because it's less expensive. So that's our goal, is to continue groundwater. You know, you hear people bantering about that Baton Rouge Water bought 60 acres on the Mississippi River. Well, I'll give you the honest to God answer why we bought 60 acres on the river. Because it was for sale and we might need it someday. I hope we never do. Okay, but we got it if we need it because again, number one priority when you turn on the tap is to have safe drinking water. And we can do that from the river. I just hope we never have to.
One thing I want to do is to follow up. Not all of industry is drawing from our aquifer. What percentage of our industry is drawing from our aquifer? Can you give us some sense of that?
I don't know that it has any beneficial. No, I cannot. When you talk about industry, there's mom and pop industry. If we're talking about petrochemical industry, I will tell you nothing south of East Baton Rouge Parish line is drawing from the aquifers because the water's salty south of the Naperville Parish is south. So all those petrochemical plants are using surface water.
Would that be Mississippi?
Yes.
Mississippi River water?
Mississippi River, for the most part, yeah. And in other parts of Louisiana, there are people drawing groundwater, but not to the extent that's happening. Baton Rouge grew up around industry. We're not here, industry's not here because we're here. I think we're here because industry's here. Exxon and these big plants, and Exxon's been a really good neighbor actually. They have made an incredible investment in taking water out of the river and supplementing their processes with river water that other large industries just haven't done. And one of the reasons for that is they can use it. They can clarify it, they can drop out the solids, and for their processes it works. But you can't make white cloth with river water cheaply. And that's what they're, or white paper, and that's what they're doing at Georgia Pacific. So there's this tension, there's this battle. I will tell you, the battle is ongoing. We need to find a way to make paper with Mississippi River water. We need to. But I don't think we can do it tomorrow. I wish we could. And I'm all ears. If you all have good arguments, I'd love you to share them with me, but I'd really love you to share them with the legislature. And I'll tell you that the Baton Rouge legislative delegation is, in fact, on our side. It's just they're getting their fannies whacked when they bring it up.
If you have any doubts about what Pat just told you, I'll share one thing with you. I met Bill Clinton when he was a governor. He had came over to the Southern Industrial Development Council. Most of y'all know I'm an economic developer by profession. And he welcomed us and then got down, and he went up to people and was talking to them about individual projects. And he walked up to me and he said, "You were responsible for the Bayou Steel project." And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, we did this and this and this and this and this." He said, "What did you do different that we didn't do?" And I said, "Sir, you have the Arkansas River, we have the Mississippi." And that is a true story. Okay, yes, sir.
As I understand the Baton Rouge Falls is one of the main deterrents as far as the saltwater intrusion into the Baton Rouge aquifer. And that is being breached or has been breached. Is there any way to augment or supplement that the use or the activity of that fault and further deterrent of the saltwater intrusion?
Okay, so we've worked with Frank Side at LSU. We've worked with some doctoral hydrologists from a company we hired named Lane Christensen. So it's not that we have breached the fault. Okay, and I'll make a really simple, because I'm a really simple guy, demonstration of this. So we had sands and clays, if my fingers are the clays, and the gaps are the sands. When that fault occurred eons ago, it shifted. And basically, as it shifted, the solids of those clay layers kind of stopped in the gaps. But it's imperfect, as my fingers are imperfect. What's exacerbating the problem of saltwater across the fault is that we're reducing the pressure in the aquifers on this side by taking water out. So the water's flowing through those gaps, but it's metered. We think, based on the studies that have been done by the USGS and others, that there are about 1.5 million gallons a day of salt water flowing north into the 1,500-foot sand dam. We don't have to get rid of all the salt that's flowed across heretofore. We need to stop it from advancing to the sources that we're taking water from. So we're not remediating the salt, which is a completely different thing. We're just trying to stop it. We're putting up a wall. We've done it in 2 places. The Capillary Groundwater Conservation Commission built what they call a connector well about 20 years ago. And we have, all the aquifers have different pressures in them. And we have a good aquifer that's got a higher pressure than one that's imperiled by salt. So we connected the two. There's no wells or anything else, no pumps. But the higher pressure water is actually forcing water down to the other aquifer. And we're building this mountain of fresh water between the fault and what we call the Government Street Station, which is down near the post office on Government Street, near Acadian. We're not fixing anything with that other than making the salt water travel farther to get to us, because now it's got to go around this mountain. It's been effective. It's worked. EPA paid for a lot of that with a grant. The program's not available to us anymore. The scavenger well that we installed, we studied for quite a long time. Lots of reasons to do it the way it was done. I don't think it's perfect. I think we can get better. But I will tell you it's not the panacea or the fix-all that some people think it is. One of the reasons we can use it in 1,500-foot sand is the 1,500-foot sand water level is stable. It's not declining. So I can put something in that aquifer that takes a little bit more water out and sends it to the river, which is what we're doing with the salt, without affecting the aquifer. And so this connector well works there. We're now talking about doing it again in another sand. The problem is the 2,000-foot sand, the water level is declining. And the faster the water level declines, it's like the old Lucille Ball chocolate factory skit, where this thing just keeps getting faster and faster. You put in a scavenger well, you're pulling more water out, the thing speeds up. So the jury's out on whether it'll be effective in the 2,000-foot sand. They just doubled the rate at which that's charged for water by the Capillary Groundwater Conservation Commission to $10 a million gallons, which is not a lot of money, but it adds up. We do about 65 million gallons a day that are subject to it. Industry pays it also. But we're going to look really closely at the 2,000-foot sand and see whether that's the solution. I'm here to tell you I don't think it is. I think the solution in the 2,000-foot sand, which is relied heavily on by industry, is to curtail consumption. They don't want to hear that. But we got to prove it before they'll listen to it, because as soon as someone says you can't, they're going to go to a judge who's going to say, you need proof. So we're collecting data. Again, it's a problem we've had since, we've known about since the 60s. We've been acting on it rather slowly. We've been studying it. We are acting more quickly now, more urgently, and I think we're going to be okay. But I hope that answers your question.
It was Stuart. Stuart, you had a question?
I was just thinking back to the program that Leadership Vision sponsored. I don't know if it was last year or the year before with Hayes. What's his name? Count. Okay. And General Honore, and there was a whole slew of people that came to talk about what seems to me somewhat related to what we're talking about today. And I want to go back and re-listen to what was said there and see kind of how it fleshes with what we're talking about today. This has been very
Stuart, if I may, and that's a point I want to bring up. All of the videos of our programs are available on our website. And you can go back and check, like she was talking about February a year ago, we did this on, but it was a slightly different thing. This time we're talking safety of water. Last time we were talking sustainability. Okay? So it's same, but it's different. Are there any last question? One last question. Remy? Oh, wait a minute. This gentleman back here hasn't had a chance.
I don't want to take any question away.
Just go ahead.
When you mentioned the Arkansas River, it prompted this thought. I know they're in the process right now in Arkansas of taking some water out of the Mississippi River, piping it over to East Texas. Pat, you mentioned that Louisiana is a little different. Surface water is taxable. If you bring it out of the ground, it's yours. Since this is Leaders with a Vision, my question is, and it may not be for any one of you up here, and I apologize if it's not, but it just prompted my thought when you said about the Arkansas River. Are there any provisions in place for us to maintain sovereignty of our own water to keep Texas or California or somebody from with Big Brother or Uncle Sam coming in saying, hey, we need to truck it, ship it, barge it, train it out to other areas that need water?
Good question. Okay, Pat. You're the one that's going to get affected first.
I have the answer.
So, okay, go ahead.
The answer is we have in place a Red River Compact Commission made up of the 4 states, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, and Oklahoma. And that compact prevents the importing of water from one state to another without their consent. So that Arkansas, right now, we should be suing Arkansas because Arkansas is not living up to the compact requirements. And I've been trying to get the Attorney General to proceed with the lawsuit, but he's gone now, and I think I have to convince the new Attorney General that Arkansas is not meeting the requirements of the Red River Compact. But that compact, which is between the 4 states and the federal government, prevents any importing of water from one state to another without their consent. Because Texas just lost a lawsuit where they were trying to swipe water from Oklahoma, and they lost that lawsuit.
Well, that's good to know. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you very much for coming today on this very critical topic. I mean, Dr. Guidry was accurate when he said this is a company town. Because every time we try to do something on the environment, our numbers go down. But we're still citizens, and it's a quality of life. And it is your voice that needs to be heard at the legislature. You know, as you're talking to your friends around Louisiana, water is a critical issue. It is the source of all life. And if we don't do something now, and even if that means that we wean industry off gradually by some long-term political vision that it can be done for the preservation of the human race in Louisiana, let's elect those kind of leaders. Hold the feet to the fire of all candidates. Hold your current legislators. Hold their feet to the fire. We have to do something. Louisiana is a phenomenal state. It is so rich with resources, and so many people take it for granted. They're not going to be there forever. It is you, the people, that have to speak up and let the legislators know we need vision and planning for our great state of Louisiana, and we'll see you next month at the same place, same time. Bye-bye.